If I was to mention the greatest Zelda duology ever made, the first of which, a technical marvel, lauded as one of the series' true high points. The second, a fantastic game in its own right, despite the hardware limitations and the extremely liberal reusing of assets. What two games would you think I was talking about? Well, what if I said that the latter of the two has seen one of the biggest shifts in critical opinion ever seen in gaming history over just the last year? Breath of the Wild was first announced in 2014 at E3, remember when that was a thing? To a resounding, oh my god, Link's a girl? The game was to be directed by Skyward Sword director Hidemaru Fujibayashi, which explains why so many of the mechanics were carried across. The series has not seen this big of a tonal shift since Ocarina of Time, and that game is like 30 years old at this point. So to call this a big leap for the franchise is an understatement. Prior to Fujibayashi's work at Nintendo, he worked at Capcom throughout the late 90s and early 2000s. And if you happen to know a lot about Capcom and Nintendo at that time, they actually had somewhat of a crossover in which Capcom was commissioned to create two Zelda games for the Game Boy Advance, The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, directed both by Fujibayashi himself. Nintendo employees are usually shrouded in so much secrecy it's hard to ascertain anything about them, but it's clear that this man wanted to make a Zelda game, a true Nintendo Zelda game, for years. But I'm not here to talk about the creation of Breath of the Wild. You can see that all on Nintendo's official channel. I think they have a few series as part of a series of making the game. They're amazing, go check them out, it's really cool. Again, a little bit shallow, but it has the building blocks for something cool there. With Skyward Sword leading the way to Breath of the Wild's inception, Nintendo was poised to make the game that defined a generation. And in 2017, the game released to worldwide critical acclaim from basically everyone. Comparing Breath of the Wild to Ocarina of Time is a lot easier than you think it might be. While Zelda loreheads will point to Skyward Sword as one of the most important parts of the entire franchise, I think in reality that lands on Ocarina of Time or Breath of the Wild. Both of these games have done so much more for the franchise than any other game in the series, and their impact on gaming as a whole cannot be denied. The fact that targeting in a 3D environment didn't exist before Zelda Ocarina of Time, it baffles me. Whereas Ocarina of Time stood out mechanically, Breath of the Wild definitely excelled visually. Hoyoverse, an extremely popular gaming giant, has almost entirely built their visual identity around Breath of the Wild's existence. Despite both of these games making such huge changes to the normal formula that the series had followed up until their points, they both essentially set new landmarks for the franchise. Every mainline Zelda game after Ocarina of Time follows its conventions very strictly, and the same can be said for Breath of the Wild, with the newly released Echoes of Wisdom featuring a very Breath of the Wild style building mechanic, whilst donning the familiar ultra-vivid cel-shaded appearance. It's not exactly a hot take within the fandom to call these two games perfect, or the closest thing you can be to perfect. Overlooking any small blemishes is completely fine, and if a sequel were ever to be developed, it would be the perfect chance to iron them out and create the true, perfect Zelda experience. So what kind of result do you get when you compare Majora's Mask, the sequel to Ocarina of Time, against Tears of the Kingdom, the sequel to Breath of the Wild? Both Majora's Mask and Tears of the Kingdom were originally conceptualized as expansions for their original title, both of which grew so large in scope they ended up their own games. The insurmountable pressure from Nintendo executives and the desire to push out one final Zelda game for their respective consoles led both of these games to experience extremely rushed development cycles. When creating the world of Majora's Mask, Eiji Aonuma said that the players of Ocarina of Time had grown up and were ready for more of a dark, melancholic tone, in the same way that Breath of the Wild is separated from its successor, Tears of the Kingdom. Both sequels, as with every Zelda game, have a large emphasis on gameplay over story, with Majora's Mask featuring the time-travelling mechanic, and Tears of the Kingdom and its large array of creative building mechanics. So that begs the question, what happened to the public opinion of Tears of the Kingdom? And why did Majora's Mask not face the same issues? In 2011, Nintendo released Skyward Sword and alongside it a book called Hyrule Historia. This book is essentially a large cobbled together compilation of mostly useless information about the series. A lot of it reads as Nintendo trying to make sense of something that they never intended to have a continuity. Zelda games have and always will be episodic, and each one can be picked up and played at any point in the entire series, but a lot of the marketing for Skyward Sword went into the fact that it was the original Zelda game, the start of the franchise, the beginning of the timeline, and with that, they published this book, which has done irreparable damage to the community since it came out. This one image here alone has created thousands and thousands of hours worth of video essays. I guarantee you Nintendo put about 5 minutes of thought into this before drafting it up and shipping it. The thing with Zelda is, a lot of fans tend to confuse what's a fan theory and what's official lore. So many fan concepts and ideas have just been taken as gospel at this point, that making sense of this loosely strung together timeline is almost impossible for a newcomer. That's not to say that there aren't references and Easter eggs to other previous titles in the series. I mean, games like Wind Waker directly reference the Hero of Time from Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask and Tears of the Kingdom being direct sequels is not fan theorizing, it's actual lore. But to say things like the hero's shade is the Hero of Time, and Termina is some kind of dream world, whilst extremely interesting, is pure speculation. So what is it that people hate about Tears of the Kingdom? Well, it's the fact that it doesn't connect almost at all to Breath of the Wild. In fact, it ignores a lot of the questions Breath of the Wild left unanswered, and takes the story in its own unique direction, in the same way that Majora's Mask completely diverted narratively from the Ocarina of Time. The Zelda team don't like to dwell too much on their past games, and creating new worlds to explore is much more interesting to them. But just like with Majora's Mask, the ongoing pressure of Nintendo executives led them to make the decision to create a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild. Nintendo, in a moment of weakness, realised that the fans have complete and utter control over their decisions, and what the fans wanted was Breath of the Wild 2. So they did so in the most Nintendo Zelda team way possible, creating an entirely new game and disregarding almost everything about Breath of the Wild. The problem with releasing a game nowadays, or anything for that matter, is that the internet is so quick to get their opinions out on it, that I don't think they truly experience it in its entirety before they leave their reviews. Tears of the Kingdom upon release was unanimously met with 10 out of 10s across the board, which is funny to think about, especially considering the opinion of the game nowadays. I think the biggest problem I had on release was that unlike Majora's Mask, Tears of the Kingdom wasn't seen as a sequel to Breath of the Wild. It was seen as a replacement, and I think that's the problem with a game like Breath of the Wild, is that the mechanics are so integral to the game that it ends up being all that some people care about. Breath of the Wild was so good at laying the groundworks for what was to come, but playing all your cards and following up with anything remotely close is a monumental task. Nowadays, searching up Tears of the Kingdom on YouTube will net you a search result of a slew of people expressing their disappointment for the game. What started out as a couple small criticisms eventually snowballed into what it is today, a universal internet hit piece for this game. The reasons are pretty consistent throughout the videos, and I like that at first it was almost controversial to say that this game was bad, with an array of hilarious titles from some of the biggest Zelda names in the YouTube space. But most, if not all of the problems that this game faces, can be in part due to its attachment issues to its daddy Breath of the Wild. In truth, I don't think the fans know what they want from Zelda any more than Nintendo does. I think that the return of Memories and Shrine is Nintendo trying to appease an impossible fandom who somehow think that Zelda now has Dark Souls level of world building, all because of YouTube, where each Zelda falls flat on its face, the next picks itself up and dusts itself off to create something new and innovative. Nintendo has been doing this for decades, not only with Zelda but with each of their franchises. Maybe not you. Tears of the Kingdom is a fantastic game in its own right, one that I think excels in every department Nintendo wanted it to. The music, the world, the characters, the spectacle are fantastic. It's some of the most fun I've ever had playing a game, and I think as little as the modern day Zelda audience want to admit, Tears of the Kingdom is Majora's Mask. Yeah, I think that's about it really though. I don't really have anything else to say on the topic, but play what Zelda game you want to play. They're all good. They're all amazing in their own right. Each game excels at something individually, and I think they're all amazing experiences. Tears of the Kingdom has been one of the most emotional roller coasters I've ever been on playing a game, and I think it's just super fun. I'm not going to spoil anything unless you haven't played the game, but some of the scenes in this game are just amazing. They are seriously amazing, and the final boss battle is one of the coolest fights in any game ever. Period. Online video essay culture and review culture has revealed a lot of hypocrisy in game journalism nowadays, and I think people enjoy hating on something a lot more than liking it. So take everything with a grain of salt and just play what you want to play, watch what you want to watch, and form your own opinions for yourself. Seeing the tides turn for this game has been extremely jarring, to say the least, and it put me off picking it up for a long time, but realizing that a lot of people don't know what they want or enjoy bandwagoning certain ideas puts the whole thing into perspective. So if you haven't played it already, go buy it. Go play it on the Switch too. It's fucking amazing. It runs beautifully. And yeah, thanks for watching.